Some say a miracle is a flower that blooms in the desert, a testament to life where none should exist. But what if the desert is your own body, the wasteland your own blood? What if the miracle is a secret you carry, like a shard of glass against your heart, knowing its discovery will not bring wonder, but ruin? For Ilara, life was a litany of lacks. She was the wolfless girl in a world defined by the beast within. She was the silent space in the glorious, savage chorus of the pack song. Her blood was thin, her scent was wrong. All human, no wild magic, no fury, no moon-mad joy. And now she was pregnant, a condition that was not a blessing but a final damning sentence. The father had been a rogue, a whisper of warmth in a life of cold, gone with the dawn, leaving nothing but this swelling in her belly and a terror so profound it had its own heartbeat, a frantic drum beneath her own. She lived on the crumbling edge of the Blackwood Pack's territory, in a hut woven from fallen branches and mud, a place more den than dwelling. The others tolerated her existence as one might tolerate a persistent weed, with scorn and a wide berth. The pack's alpha, Alaric, a brute whose power was a club he wielded with glee, saw her as a walking symbol of weakness, a stain on the vibrant tapestry of his dominion. Her every breath felt like a theft of air that belonged to those more worthy, those with claws and fangs and a second soul roaring in their veins. If you're captivated by Ilara's story and want to see where this journey leads, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more tales of impossible love and destiny. Today, the air was different. It was thick with a tension that had nothing to do with her. It tasted of ozone and old power, a scent that made the very trees seem to stand straighter, more alert. The Alpha King was coming. Kalen. A name spoken in whispers, a legend given flesh. He was the Alpha of Alphas, the ruler of all territories, a force of nature whose true form was said to be a thing of myth, a wolf of shadow and silver. His visit was a rare, terrifying honor. Ilara knew what she had to do: disappear. She slipped from her hut, a basket clutched in her hand, and made for the blighted reach, a stretch of woods where the earth was soured by some ancient battle. No one came here. The game was scarce, the plants twisted. It was safe. It was hers. She moved through the skeletal trees, her worn leather boots making little sound on the damp earth. She was gathering moon petal, a pale, bitter herb that eased the sickness churning in her stomach. Her fingers, stained with dirt, brushed against the soft leaves. Just for a little while. He will come, inspect the pack, and leave. No one will even remember I exist. The thought was a familiar comfort, the cloak of her own insignificance. She felt the shift in pressure first. A silence fell that was deeper than mere quiet. The insects stopped their chirping. The wind died. Shadow fell over her, vast and absolute. She froze, her heart seizing in her chest. She did not need to turn to know. The scent that had permeated the territory was now a crushing presence, a storm of pine and cold mountain air and something else, something achingly powerful and purely male. Slowly, as if moving through water, she straightened and turned. He stood not 10 feet away, flanked by 2 guards whose stillness was more menacing than any snarl, but she barely saw them. Her eyes were fixed on the king. He was everything the legends claimed and more, taller than any man she had ever seen, with shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of the world. His black hair was long, tied back with a simple leather cord, revealing the sharp, aristocratic lines of his face. But it was his eyes that held her captive. They were the color of molten silver, intelligent, ancient, and utterly aware. They saw everything. They saw her. Panic, cold and sharp, clawed its way up her throat. She expected the disgust, the immediate dismissal she received from everyone else. Her wolflessness was a stench to true shifters, an absence that felt like a void. She braced herself for the curl of his lip, the cold command to his guards to remove the filth from his sight. Instead, he simply watched her. The silence stretched, thin and taut. His silver eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of something. Confusion? No. It was focus. An intensity so profound it felt like a physical touch, stripping away her threadbare tunic, her skin, her very bones, seeking the secret shame she held within. He took a step forward. His guards tensed, but he lifted a hand, a subtle gesture that kept them in place. He moved with a predator's grace that was utterly silent, his boots making no more sound than a falling leaf. He stopped just beyond arm's reach, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. He inhaled deeply, his head tilted. It was the way a wolf tested a scent, cataloging it, understanding it. She saw the moment his expression changed. The focus sharpened into disbelief, then into a dawning, terrifying awe. His silver eyes dropped from her face to her belly, where her child lay hidden beneath layers of worn wool. He knew. The world tilted on its axis. He knows. He knows. He will kill me. He will tear the abomination from my womb. The litany of fear screamed through her mind, but the look in his eyes held no violence. It held a fragile, desperate hope she could not comprehend. His gaze lifted back to hers, and the universe shrank to the space between them. A single word left his lips, not a command or a question, but a statement of discovery, a whisper that shattered the forest's silence and the miserable quiet of her life. You. The word hung in the air, a thing of weight and power. It was not the you of accusation she was so accustomed to, the one that meant you, the broken one, you, the outcast. This was something else entirely. It was a sound of recognition, of finding something precious and long lost. For a breathless moment, Alara could not react. Her body was a pillar of ice, her thoughts a whirlwind of confusion and terror. The Alpha King, Kalen, continued to stare at her, his silver eyes tracing the lines of her face as if memorizing a sacred text. He saw the fear that widened her eyes, the tremble in her lips, the way she clutched the basket of herbs to her chest like a shield. Behind him, his guards shifted, their unease a palpable thing. They did not understand their king's fixation on this human. A wolfless female on the edge of a mid-rank pack's territory was less than dust beneath their feet. Yet Kalen seemed to see a galaxy in her. The local alpha, Alaric, finally crashed through the undergrowth, his scent a foul wave of aggression and sycophantic panic. He had clearly been searching for the king. He skidded to a halt when he saw the scene, his eyes flicking from Kalen to Alara, his face darkening with fury. "Your Majesty," he began, his voice a low growl of forced deference. "Forgive this intrusion. This creature is a stray, a flaw. She has no place in your sight. I will have her removed at once." He took a step toward Alara, his hand raised as if to grab her, to drag her away from the king's hallowed presence. Kalen didn't even turn his head. He simply lifted his hand again, palm out. The gesture was calm, unhurried. Yet it stopped Alaric as effectively as a stone wall. The air crackled with invisible power, a low hum of authority that pressed down on everyone, forcing the very air from their lungs. Alaric froze, his eyes wide, a trickle of sweat tracing a path down his temple. He had forgotten, in his provincial arrogance, what true power felt like. "She will not be removed," Kalen said. His voice was quiet, a low baritone that resonated deep in Alara's bones, yet it carried the unshakable force of a mountain. "She will be brought to my quarters." Alaric stared, dumbfounded. "Majesty? But she is wolfless. She is nothing." Kalen finally turned his head, a slow, deliberate movement. His silver eyes were no longer filled with awe, but with a chilling coldness that promised death. Did I ask for your assessment, Alpha Alaric, or did I give you a command? The title was a blade, sharp and mocking. Alaric paled, bowing his head so low his nose nearly touched the dirt. A command, your majesty. Forgive me. It will be done. He straightened, his face a mask of humiliation and simmering rage. He glared at Alara, a look that promised retribution, but he dared not disobey. He barked an order at two of his own warriors who had followed him. Take her. The Blackwood wolves approached Alara cautiously, as if she were a venomous snake. She flinched as one reached for her arm, his touch rough, his sneer unconcealed. Before his fingers could fully close around her flesh, one of Kaelin's royal guards moved. He was a blur of black leather and steel, appearing between Alara and the pack wolf in the space of a heartbeat. His hand closed around the pack wolf's wrist, and a sharp crack echoed through the clearing. The wolf howled in pain, stumbling back and clutching his broken bones. The king said she is to be brought, the royal guard said, his voice flat and devoid of emotion. He did not say she was to be manhandled. His eyes, chips of obsidian, dared anyone else to move. Kaelin turned his attention back to Alara, his expression softening almost imperceptibly. The fury was gone, replaced by that unnerving, intense focus. He saw her terror, the way she was shrinking into herself, trying to become small enough to vanish. He understood he was the cause of it. He took a half step back, a gesture of concession, of giving her space. I will not harm you, he said, his voice for her ears alone. It was a vow. You are under my protection now. Protection? The word was foreign. No one had ever protected her. She had only ever known how to hide. She looked from his impossibly sincere face to the enraged Alpha Alaric, to the pack wolves who looked at her with a new, dangerous mixture of fear and hatred. She understood then that whatever this protection was, it was also a cage. Kaelin had just painted a target on her back so large that no one in the world could possibly miss it. He had lifted her from her invisible misery and placed her on a pedestal in the center of a storm. She didn't know which was worse. As the royal guards gently, impersonally, escorted her from the woods, she could feel Alaric's glare burning into her spine. Kaelin walked beside her, a silent, formidable presence that kept the world at bay, yet drew every eye towards them. She clutched her basket of moon petal, the crushed leaves releasing their bitter scent. The sickness in her belly was no longer just from the child. It was the icy grip of a fate she could never have imagined, one that was far more terrifying than being left alone. The quarters assigned to the Alpha King were the grandest lodge in the Blackwood Pack's compound, built from massive, dark timbers and riverstone. It was a place of power Alara had only ever glimpsed from a distance. Now she stood in the center of its main room, feeling as small and out of place as a field mouse in a lion's den. A fire roared in a cavernous hearth, casting dancing shadows on walls adorned with hunting trophies and ancient tapestries. The air smelled of wood smoke, beeswax, and the overwhelming scent of Kaelin himself. He dismissed his guards with a nod, leaving them alone. The sudden privacy was more intimidating than the crowd had been. He gestured to a carved wooden chair near the fire, its surface covered in a plush fur pelt. Please, sit. His voice was softer now, the iron command replaced with a careful gentleness. She hesitated, her body rigid with a lifetime of being told where she could not go, what she could not touch. He waited, his patience a tangible thing. Finally she moved, perching on the very edge of the chair, her back ramrod straight, her hands clutching her now empty basket in her lap. He did not sit, but moved to a side table, pouring spiced wine into a silver goblet. He did not offer her any, his eyes flicking to her belly with an understanding that stole her breath. Instead, he poured a second goblet with clean, cool water and brought it to her, his large hand dwarfing the delicate stem. He knelt before her chair to offer it, a gesture of such profound humility from a king that it sent another shockwave through her system. Her hand trembled as she took it. Their fingers brushed. A jolt, like lightning, shot up her arm. It was not magic, not in the way the shifters spoke of it. It was a current of pure life, a shock of warmth against the perpetual cold of her existence. He felt it too. She saw it in the sudden widening of his silver eyes, the sharp intake of his breath. He held her gaze for a long moment before rising and moving to stand by the fire, putting a safer distance between them. "What is your name?" he asked, his voice a low rumble. "Ilara." The word was a mouse squeak in the vast room. "Ilara," he repeated, tasting the name on his tongue. It sounded different when he said it, less like a label for something broken and more like a prayer. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You are not afraid of me." It wasn't a question. "I am terrified," she whispered, the honest words slipping out before she could stop them. A flicker of something, disappointment, amusement, crossed his face. "You hide it well. Your heart beats steadily. You do not flinch from my gaze. Most, even alphas, cannot say the same. My heart has been beating this frantic drum of fear for so long, it has forgotten any other rhythm. It is my normal state." The thought was sharp and clear in her mind. She said nothing, only took a small sip of water. He seemed to understand her silence, to be able to read the thoughts she kept locked away. "Alaric considers you a flaw," he stated, his eyes boring into hers. "Why?" She looked down at her hands, at the dirt beneath her fingernails. "I am wolfless," she said, the two words that had defined her entire existence. "I have no second form, no pack bond. I am incomplete." She waited for the familiar recoil, the confirmation of her worthlessness. It didn't come. "I do not see a flaw," he said, his voice soft but firm. "I see a woman carrying a miracle." Her head snapped up. "It is not a miracle," she choked out, the words laced with the bitterness of her secret shame. "It is a curse, a mistake." "No," he said, and the certainty in that single word was absolute. "For 100 years my line has been barren. For 100 years our women have given birth to stillborn pups, their wolves too strong for their human forms, tearing them apart before they can draw breath. The royal bloodline is withering, dying. Our seers have spoken of it for generations. They spoke of a hope, a prophecy." He took a step closer, his silver eyes blazing with a fervor that frightened and mesmerized her. They spoke of a mother who would be a vessel of pure humanity, untouched by the wolf spirit, strong enough to bear a child who could bridge the two worlds, a wolfless woman carrying the air. They said she would be found in the shadow of a black wood, and that her child would save us all. Ilara stared at him, her mind reeling. Prophecy? An heir? This had nothing to do with her. She was just a girl who had made a foolish mistake with a handsome rogue. "You are wrong," she insisted, shaking her head. "The father, he was nobody. A wanderer. This child is not yours." Kalen's expression did not change. The fervent hope in his eyes did not waver. The prophecy did not say the king would sire the child. It said he would find him, that he would protect his mother, that he would claim them both as his own. He moved closer still, until he was looming over her, a mountain of strength and conviction. He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before it came to rest on her cheek. His thumb was rough with calluses, but his touch was reverent. "I have searched my entire life for you, Ilara. I have walked through wastelands of despair, and now you are here. Just then, a commotion erupted outside the lodge. Alaric's voice, raised in anger, was clearly audible. "She is a member of my pack. You have no right." Another voice, calm and deadly, replied, "The king has every right. Stand down, Alaric." Kaelin did not remove his hand from her cheek. His eyes never left hers, but a low growl rumbled in his chest, a sound of pure possessiveness and lethal intent. "He is testing me," he murmured. He straightened up, his entire demeanor shifting. The gentle, hopeful man was gone, replaced instantly by the Alpha King. "Stay here. You are safe." He strode to the door and threw it open. Alaric stood on the porch, his face contorted with rage, held at bay by Kaelin's two royal guards. When he saw Kaelin, he took an involuntary step back. "You dare challenge my authority in my own compound?" Kaelin's voice was deceptively soft, but it sliced through the night air like a razor. "She is under my protection," he stated, leaving no room for argument. "That means she is mine. Her child is mine. Anyone who threatens her threatens me. Do you understand the consequences of threatening your king, Alpha Alaric?" Alaric's fury withered under the cold fire of Kaelin's gaze. He bowed his head, defeated. "Yes, your majesty." Kaelin watched him for a long, punishing moment before closing the door, shutting out the rest of the world once more. He turned back to Alara. The king was gone again, and the man returned. The vulnerability in his eyes was startling. "He will not touch you again," he promised. "No one will." He had claimed her. In front of her Alpha, in front of his guards, he had declared her his. She wasn't just protected. She was possessed. And, in the deepest, most broken part of her soul, a part she thought had died long ago, a tiny, treacherous flower of hope began to unfurl. The days that followed were a surreal dream from which Alara expected to wake at any moment. She was moved from her hovel into a warm, comfortable room adjoining the king's own. It had a soft bed piled high with furs, a window that overlooked the mountains instead of a muddy track, and a small fire that was always lit. Servants, their faces a mixture of awe and resentment, brought her meals on wooden trays, stews rich with meat, fresh bread, sweet berries, more food than she had sometimes eaten in a week. They brought her clean clothes, simple tunics and leggings of soft, undyed wool that felt impossibly luxurious against her skin. She was an object of intense curiosity and speculation. The pack members who had once ignored her or sneered at her now watched her with wide, uncertain eyes. She was the wolfless girl, the flaw, yet the Alpha King himself had claimed her. They didn't understand, and their confusion curdled into suspicion. Whispers followed her like shadows whenever she dared to step outside. Witch. Seductress. How did a nothing like her ensnare the king? The venom was quieter now, but it was still there, perhaps even more potent for being forced underground. Lyra, Alpha Alaric's mate, was the most openly hostile. She was a tall, proud she-wolf with hair the color of fire and eyes that burned with jealousy. She would watch Alara from across the compound, her expression one of pure, unadulterated hatred. Alara was everything Lyra was not. Weak, wolfless, human. Yet she had captured the attention of the one man whose power dwarfed even her own mates. To Lyra, it was an intolerable insult. Alara did her best to ignore it all, retreating into the quiet sanctuary of her room. She spent her time mending the new clothes, her fingers finding comfort in the simple, repetitive motion of the needle. It was a piece of her old life, a familiar task in a world turned upside down. Kaelin was a constant, steady presence. He did not crowd her, but he was always near. He took his meals with her, sitting across a small table in her room, the silence between them more comfortable than any conversation she had ever known. He would ask her simple questions about the herbs she gathered, about the stories her human mother had told her before she died. He listened with an attentiveness that made her feel, for the first time, truly seen. He never spoke of the prophecy again, but it was there in every look, every gesture. It was in the way he would place a hand on the small of her back as they walked, a silent ward against the hostile stares. It was in the way his eyes would sometimes drift to her belly, a look of such profound reverence and hope on his face that it made her heart ache. One evening, as a storm raged outside, lashing the lodge with wind and rain, he found her staring into the fire, her hands wrapped around her swollen abdomen. The child was moving, a fluttery, insistent kick against her palm. A small, involuntary smile touched her lips. Kaelin came to stand behind her chair, his warmth a welcome shield against the storm's chill. "He is strong," he said softly. Her smile vanished. She looked away from the fire. "How can you be so certain?" she whispered. "How can you look at me, at this, and see a miracle? Everyone else sees a mistake, an aberration. Maybe they're right. Maybe this is all a cruel joke, a king's delusion, and when he wakes from it, I will be cast out again, but this time from a greater height." "They are blind," he said, his voice a low, fierce rumble. He came around the chair and knelt before her, just as he had that first day. He took her hand, the one resting on her belly, and covered it with his own. His touch was warm, solid, a grounding force. They see only what they have been taught to see: strength in claws, power in a second form. They do not understand true strength. His thumb stroked the back of her hand. The strength it takes to survive in a world that tells you every day that you are worthless. The strength to nurture a new life when you have been given nothing. The strength to stand tall when all you want to do is crumble. His silver eyes held hers, and in their depths, she saw a reflection of her own pain, her own loneliness. She saw the burden of his crown, the isolation of his power. He was a king, a god among wolves, but he was also a man who had been searching for something, just as she had been. "You are not an aberration, Alara," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the answer to a prayer I had forgotten how to speak." He leaned in, his forehead coming to rest against hers. His breath was warm on her skin. She could feel the faint tremor in his hands, a sign of the powerful emotions he held so tightly in check. In that moment, he was not a king, and she was not an outcast. They were simply two lonely souls who had found a glimmer of light in each other's darkness. The intimacy of the moment was overwhelming. It was more terrifying than his power, more potent than any command. It was a thread of connection, weaving itself between them, and she was terrified that if she pulled on it, it would unravel, leaving her more alone than ever before. But as his thumb continued its soothing caress over her hand, she found she couldn't pull away. For the first time, she allowed herself to lean into his touch, to accept the comfort he was offering, to dare to believe, just for a second, that he might be right. The fragile peace Alara had found was not destined to last. Kaelin was summoned away to the northern border to settle a violent dispute between two warring packs. He was reluctant to go, his gaze lingering on her as he prepared to leave, a storm of worry in his silver eyes. "My guards will remain," he assured her, his hand on her arm. "No one will harm you. I will not be long." He placed a soft kiss on her forehead, a gesture so tender and unexpected it left her breathless. "Be safe," he murmured against her skin. Then he was gone, and the lodge felt vast and empty without his presence. The wolves of the Blackwood pack seemed to sense the shift in power. With Kaelin gone, his protective aura diminished, and Alaric's simmering resentment began to bubble to the surface. The whispers grew louder, bolder. Lyra's hateful glares became open sneers. Alara retreated further into her rooms, feeling the walls closing in. The royal guards were diligent, standing watch outside her door day and night, their stoic presence a deterrent. But they could not stop the poison that was seeping through the cracks. It was Lyra who found the means to act. She had always been jealous of Alara, but the king's favor had twisted that jealousy into a murderous obsession. She saw Ilara not just as a rival, but as an existential threat. This wolfless nobody, this human filth, was carrying a child the king was ready to claim as the heir. An heir that Lyra, despite her pure bloodline and alpha status, had been unable to provide Alaric. Her barrenness was her own secret shame, and Alara's impossible fertility was a constant, burning reminder of it. She consulted an old crone who lived deep in the woods, a practitioner of the forbidden arts. From her, she obtained a bundle of dark, twisted roots known as wolfsbane, not the common variety, but a more potent, corrupted strain that was poison to shifters and humans alike. In small doses, it caused disorientation and weakness. In larger doses, it could force a womb to expel its contents. Lyra waited for the right moment. One of the servants who brought Alara's meals was a young she-wolf desperate to win Lyra's favor. A few whispered promises, a veiled threat, and the girl was hers to command. That evening, Ilara's meal arrived as usual. She was feeling particularly tired, the weight of the child heavy within her. She ate the stew without much thought, its flavor masked by heavy spices. Within an hour, the first cramp seized her. It was sharp and vicious, stealing her breath and making her cry out. She clutched her belly, a cold dread washing over her. Another cramp followed, stronger this time, then another. This was not the gentle fluttering of the baby's movements. This was a violent, tearing pain. It was too soon. Far too soon. No. No. Please no. The panicked thought ricocheted around her skull. She tried to stand, to call for the guards, but her legs buckled beneath her. A wave of dizziness washed over her, the room tilting sickeningly. The fire in the hearth seemed to dim, the shadows in the corners deepening, twisting into menacing shapes. She collapsed onto the furs by the hearth, her body convulsing with another wave of agony. Through a haze of pain, she heard the door to her room open. But it wasn't the guards. It was Lyra, a triumphant, cruel smile on her beautiful face. Alaric stood behind her, his expression a mask of grim satisfaction. "It seems the witch's spawn is eager to be born," Lyra purred, her voice dripping with malice. "Or perhaps it is a demon, clawing its way out." Alara looked at them, terror giving way to a surge of protective fury so fierce it momentarily eclipsed the pain. "What have you done?" she gasped, her voice raw. "We are simply helping nature along," Alaric sneered, "cleansing our pack of your filth." He grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh like talons, and hauled her to her feet. The world spun, but she fought to stay upright, her free hand protectively covering her belly. The pain was a constant roaring tide now, but her fear for her child was a blazing sun that burned away everything else. This was her baby, her secret, her only connection to a moment of warmth in a lifetime of cold. It was not a prophecy or an heir. It was hers, and she would not let them take it. They dragged her from the lodge out into the cold night air. The royal guards lay unconscious on the ground, their faces pale, small darts protruding from their necks. The rest of the pack was gathered in the central clearing, their faces illuminated by flickering torchlight, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and morbid excitement. They were being led to the circle of judgment, a ring of ancient stones where pack justice was dispensed. It was where the weak were culled, the traitors executed. It was a place of death. They threw her into the center of the circle. She landed hard on the cold, unforgiving earth, another contraction ripping a scream from her throat. "Behold," Alaric bellowed to the assembled pack, "the human whore and the demon she carries. Her presence has brought a curse upon us, a blight favored by a delusional king. We will purge this poison tonight, and our pack will be strong again." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. They were afraid. Afraid of the king, afraid of the prophecy, afraid of the unknown. And Alaric was giving their fear a target. Lyra stepped forward, a ceremonial dagger in her hand, its obsidian blade gleaming in the firelight. "The blood of the unnatural must be spilled to purify the ground," she chanted, her eyes wild with fanaticism. She raised the dagger high. Ilara pushed herself up onto her elbows, her body screaming in protest. She looked at the faces in the crowd, the wolves she had lived amongst her whole life, who had scorned her, ignored her, and now were ready to watch her die. There was no help here. There was only her. The desperation, the terror, the agony coalesced into a single point of white-hot rage. "You will not have him," she thought, the words a silent roar in her soul. "You will not touch my son." As Lyra brought the dagger down, something inside Alara snapped. It was not a conscious decision. It was a primal, maternal instinct taking over. A force erupted from her, a wave of pure, untamed life. It was not wolf magic. It was older, wilder, the raw power of creation itself. A brilliant golden light exploded from her, pulsing outwards in a visible wave. It slammed into Lyra and Alaric, throwing them back as if they were rag dolls. It washed over the entire clearing, a silent, concussive force that knocked wolves off their feet and extinguished the torches, plunging the scene into sudden darkness, save for the ethereal glow that now surrounded Alara. She lay in the center of the circle, panting, the golden light pulsing gently around her, a shield forged from a mother's love. The pain in her womb subsided, replaced by a strange warmth. The pack was silent, stunned into submission, staring in terror and awe at the wolfless girl who was anything but weak. Miles away, on the storm-lashed northern border, Kalen felt it. He was in the middle of a tense negotiation, his presence the only thing preventing two rival alphas from tearing each other's throats out. One moment, he was speaking, his voice calm and commanding. The next, a jolt went through him, a psychic shock that had nothing to do with the tension in the room. It was a feeling of profound violation, a tearing sensation deep in his soul. It was the echo of the protection he had placed on Alara, shattering. Her name was a silent scream in his mind. Ilara. He did not hesitate. He did not explain. His head snapped up, his silver eyes turning feral. He looked at the two squabbling alphas, and the full, terrifying weight of his own beast rose to the surface. "This is over," he snarled, his voice dropping into a register that was more animal than man. A wave of pure dominance rolled off him, forcing both alphas to their knees, their heads bowed in submission. He turned to his second-in-command, a grizzled, battle-scarred wolf named Marcus. "Take care of this. I am returning to Blackwood. Now." Without another word, he was gone. He strode from the tent and shifted. The change was instantaneous, a violent explosion of muscle and sinew. Where the king had stood, there was now a creature of nightmare and legend. A wolf larger than any horse, with a coat the color of a starless midnight and eyes that burned with cold silver fire. He was the embodiment of the royal line's power, a force of nature unleashed. He ran. The world became a blur of snow and pine. His powerful legs devoured the miles, his paws barely seeming to touch the ground. The wind howled past his ears, but the only sound in his head was the frantic, desperate pounding of his own heart. Too slow. I am too slow. Every instinct screamed that he was running out of time. He pushed harder, his muscles burning, his lungs screaming for air, driven by a terror he had never known in all his long life. He had spent a century searching for her, the miracle that would save his people, the woman who would save him. and in his arrogance, he had left her. He had left her vulnerable, surrounded by jealous, petty beasts who could not comprehend her value. The fury that rose in him was a white-hot inferno. It was a rage directed at Alaric, at Lyra, but most of all, at himself. Back in the circle of judgment, the golden light around Alara began to fade. The exertion, combined with the poison and the premature labor, had taken its toll. The pain was returning, a dull, insistent ache. The pack was slowly stirring, their fear turning back into aggression as the inexplicable event ended. Alaric staggered to his feet, his face a mask of disbelief and rage. "Witchcraft!" he roared, pointing a trembling finger at her. "She summoned a demon to protect her. She must be destroyed before it returns." He started forward, but a shadow detached itself from the darkness and landed in front of him with a heavy, earth-shaking thud. It was Kalen. He stood in his true form, a monster of myth, his massive head lowered, a growl vibrating from his chest that was the sound of an earthquake. The silver eyes were fixed on Alaric, and in them was a promise of utter annihilation. The entire pack froze, paralyzed by the sheer, overwhelming power radiating from their king. Alaric's face went white with terror. He had never seen the king in his wolf form. No one had, not in generations. He had thought the stories were exaggerations. He was wrong. Kalen took a slow, deliberate step forward. Alaric scrambled backward, falling over his own feet. The king ignored him. His burning gaze swept over the scene, his unconscious guards, the terrified pack, Lyra cowering behind a stone, and finally, Alara. Curled on the ground, pale and trembling, but alive. A wave of relief so profound it almost buckled his powerful legs washed through him. He shifted back in a swirl of shadow and coalescing energy, standing once more as a man. Though his naked skin steamed in the cold night air and his eyes still held the feral silver fire of the beast. He did not bother to cover himself. All his attention, all his focus, was on Alara. He crossed the circle in 3 long strides and knelt at her side, his movements exquisitely gentle. He ignored the blood, the dirt, the entire cowering pack. He saw only her. He reached out, his hand hovering over her face, as if afraid she might break at his touch. "Alara," he breathed, his voice raw with 1,000 emotions. She looked up at him, her eyes wide with pain and exhaustion, but also with a fierce, defiant light. He saw it then, the strength he had spoken of, the power she didn't know she possessed. She had saved herself. She had saved their child. Awe filled him, overriding the fury, overriding the fear. He gently brushed a strand of sweat-soaked hair from her forehead. His touch was a balm, a promise of safety that she could finally allow herself to believe. "I am here," he whispered. "I am here." He looked at her belly, where a faint residual golden light still seemed to shimmer beneath the skin. Then he looked up, his gaze finding Alaric, who was trying to crawl away unnoticed. Kalen's expression hardened into something terrible to behold. "You," he said, and the single word was a death sentence. He rose to his feet, a god of vengeance in the torchlight. "You laid hands on what is mine. You threatened my mate, my child." He started walking toward Alaric, his movements slow, deliberate, each step a hammer blow of impending doom. For that, there is no forgiveness. The fight, if it could be called that, was over before it began. Alaric shifted, a desperate last-ditch effort to meet the king's wrath with a beast of his own. His wolf was large, powerful by any normal standard, but compared to the fury of the Alpha King, it was nothing. Kalen met his charge not with his own wolf, but with the cold, precise violence of a king. He moved with preternatural speed, his hands striking like lightning, breaking bone, tearing sinew. It was a brutal, efficient dismantling of power. He stripped Alaric of his beast, of his alpha status, of his very life, leaving him a broken thing on the ground. He turned, his chest heaving, his body splattered with blood that was not his own. His silver eyes found Lyra. She screamed, a thin, pathetic sound. He simply looked at her, and that look was enough. It broke her. He turned his back on them both, his justice delivered. He walked back to Alara, his rage receding as quickly as it had come, replaced by an overwhelming need to comfort, to protect. He knelt before her again in the center of the silent, terrified pack. He carefully gathered her into his arms, cradling her against his bare chest as if she were the most precious thing in the universe. She was so light, so fragile. He could feel the tremors running through her body, the frantic beat of her heart against his. He pressed his face into her hair, inhaling her scent of herbs and earth and courage. "They called you broken," he murmured, his voice thick and choked with emotion, loud enough for every wolf in the clearing to hear. "They called you flawed, but you are whole. You are the heart of a world I thought was dead." He pulled back slightly, his silver eyes locking with hers. They were filled with a reverence that humbled her, that healed the deepest cuts of her soul. "You are my miracle, Alara. You and the child you carry. My queen." And there, in the circle of judgment, surrounded by the wreckage of her old life, Kaelin made his vow. "I swear on my blood, my beast, and my crown," he said, his voice ringing with power and sincerity. "I claim you as my mate. I claim your child as my own blood and heir. I will spend the rest of my days honoring you, protecting you, and loving you. No one will ever harm you again. This I vow." He sealed the promise with a kiss, a gentle press of his lips to hers that was more sacred than any ceremony, more binding than any law. It was a promise of a new life, born from terror and pain, but forged in the unquenchable fire of a king's devotion and a mother's love. The aftermath of that night was a seismic shift that realigned the entire world, or at least, Alara's small corner of it. Kaelin was true to his word. A new alpha, a sober, steady wolf chosen by Kaelin himself, was appointed to lead the Blackwood pack. Lyra was exiled, sent to live out her days in a barren, isolated territory in the far north, a fate many considered worse than death. The pack, having witnessed the king's fury and his utter devotion, now looked upon Alara with a terrified reverence. She was no longer the wolfless outcast. She was the king's chosen, the vessel of their future. Their fear was a new kind of cage, but it was one lined with safety. Kaelin took her away from Blackwood the very next day. They traveled in a guarded carriage, its interior lined with soft furs to cushion her from the road. The journey to the capital, a massive fortress city carved into the heart of a mountain, took weeks. Throughout the journey, Kaelin never left her side. He tended to her with a gentle, patient care that continued to astound her. He learned the herbs she needed to soothe the lingering cramps, brewing them himself over their nightly fire. He would talk to her for hours, not about prophecies or politics, but about her dreams, her fears, the small, quiet things that made her who she was. He was mapping the landscape of her soul, and in turn, she began to see beyond the king. She saw Kaelin, the man. A man who carried the crushing weight of his lineage, who had been raised in isolation, taught that duty came before all else, a man who had been profoundly, deeply lonely. His miracle was not just about an heir, it was about connection. It was about finding the one person in the world who saw him, not his crown. She was the only one who didn't flinch from his power, because she had never coveted it. She had a strength he lacked, a resilience born of pure survival, and he admired it with every fiber of his being. The royal citadel of Silverfang was as intimidating as Kaelin's wolf form. It was a city of soaring gray stone towers, connected by high bridges, its halls filled with ancient artifacts and the silent ghosts of 100 generations of kings. The court was a viper's nest of old bloodlines and political ambition. When Kalen presented Alara as his chosen mate, a human, a wolfless woman carrying a child of unknown parentage, the shock was palpable. But no one dared to challenge him. The story of what had happened at Blackwood had traveled ahead of them, a chilling tale of the king's wrath. His vow had been public. To question Alara was to question him, and no one was foolish enough to do that. They bowed, their faces masks of civility, but their eyes were cold with judgment. It was a different kind of rejection, more polished than the raw scorn of the pack, but just as sharp. I don't belong here. The thought was a constant companion in those first few weeks. She felt like a brown sparrow in a cage of peacocks. The ladies of the court, with their fine silks and whispered intrigues, looked through her. The stern, powerful lords who advised Kalen spoke to him as if she wasn't even in the room. But Kalen was her shield. He included her in every conversation, sought her opinion on matters of state, and dismissed anyone who showed her the slightest disrespect with a glacial coldness that was far more effective than any outburst. He was teaching his court a new language, the language of respect for their queen. Slowly, she began to carve out a space for herself. She took over the castle's neglected greenhouses, her knowledge of herbs and plants far exceeding that of the royal gardeners. She found purpose in nurturing life from the soil, her hands in the dirt a comforting reminder of who she was. She began to feel the baby's life not as a source of fear, but as a source of profound strength. The golden light she had unleashed in the circle had been the child's power, a primal magic protecting its mother. She was connected to this baby in a way that transcended blood and bone. They were two parts of a single, extraordinary whole. The bond between her and Kalen deepened with each passing day. It was a quiet, slow-blooming love, nurtured in the quiet moments away from the court. It was in the way he would seek her out in the greenhouse, his large frame looking comically out of place amongst the delicate blossoms, just to watch her work. It was in the way she would leave a calming tea by his desk when he worked late into the night, wrestling with the burdens of his kingdom. It was in the long, comfortable silences they shared, watching the moon rise over the mountain peaks. One night, as her time grew near, he came to their chambers to find her standing on the balcony, her hands on her huge belly, looking out at the sprawling city below. He came to stand behind her, wrapping his arms around her and resting his chin on her shoulder. His hands covered hers on the swell of her stomach. "Are you afraid?" he asked softly. She considered the question. The fear that had been her constant companion for so long was still there. A faint hum in the background, but it was no longer the defining music of her life. "No," she said, and was surprised to find it was the truth. "Whatever comes, we will face it. This child, he is a part of you now too. Not by blood, but by choice. By love." Kalen tightened his embrace, pressing a kiss to her temple. "He was always a part of me," he whispered. "Just as you were. I just had to find you." The pain began just after midnight. It was different this time, not the violent, poisoned agony of before, but a powerful, natural rhythm. Kalen stayed by her side, his hand a constant anchor in hers. He was a rock in the storm of her pain, his calm strength flowing into her, giving her courage. As the dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, their son was born. He was small, perfect, with a dusting of dark hair and eyes that, when they opened, were the same startling, molten silver as his new father's. He did not cry. He simply looked around the room with a calm, ancient wisdom. As Kalen carefully cut the cord and placed the baby in Alara's arms, a soft golden light pulsed from the child's body, filling the room with warmth and the scent of ozone and blooming flowers. It was the light of a miracle, undeniable and real. Ilara looked from her son's face to Kaelin's. The king's eyes were filled with tears, his carefully constructed walls of control completely undone by the tiny life in her arms. He reached out a trembling finger and stroked the baby's cheek. "Kale," she whispered. His head snapped up, his eyes meeting hers. "His name is Kale," she said, her voice firm, "after his father." In that moment the prophecy was fulfilled. The wolfless girl had borne the heir, the lonely king had found his family. But for Ilara, the true miracle wasn't the prophecy or the crown or the golden light. It was this, the simple, profound, and unconditional love that had bloomed in the wasteland, proving that the most broken ground could still be the site of the most beautiful Genesis. This is a love story for the ages. If you've been moved by Ilara and Kaelin's journey, hit that subscribe button and join our community of romance lovers. The years that followed, proving that the most broken ground could still be the site of the most beautiful Genesis. The years that followed were a testament to that Genesis. The birth of Prince Kael was a moment of profound change for the kingdom. The child was a bridge between worlds, a perfect fusion of his origins. He had his mother's human resilience and her innate connection to the earth. But when he was old enough, he also shifted into a wolf pup with his father's midnight fur and silver eyes. The curse on the royal line was broken. The whispers against Ilara in the court died, replaced by a grudging and then genuine respect. She was not just the woman the king loved, she was the queen who had saved them all. But her new status never changed who she was. She remained Ilara, the woman who preferred the greenhouse to the throne room, who knew the names of the kitchen staff and the worries of the stable hands. Her kindness became as legendary as Kaelin's strength. She ruled with a quiet compassion that tempered her husband's iron will, and together, they ushered in an era of unprecedented peace and prosperity. She never forgot where she came from. She established programs to care for the outcasts of their society, the wolfless, the half-breeds, the aging wolves who could no longer hunt. She created sanctuaries where they were treated with dignity, proving that a pack, and a kingdom, was only as strong as its most vulnerable member. Kaelin supported her in everything, his love and admiration for her deepening with every passing year. He had found not just a mate, but an equal, a partner whose wisdom he trusted above all others. He delighted in being a father. He would spend hours with young Kael, teaching him the ways of the wolf and the duties of a king, but also simply playing with him, his laughter echoing through the stone halls that had been silent for too long. He found a joy in family that he had never thought possible. Their love story became a legend in its own right, a tale told around hearth fires in every territory. It was the story of the powerful king who saw the worth in a woman no one else did, and the wolfless outcast who possessed a strength greater than any beast. It was a story of transformation, not just for them, but for their entire world. It redefined their understanding of power, teaching them that true strength was not about dominance, but about acceptance, not about perfection, but about the courage to love what is different. If stories of transformation and true love inspire you, give this video a thumbs up and share it with friends who need to hear about Ilara's incredible journey. One cool autumn evening, many years later, Ilara stood on the same balcony where Kaelin had found her before their son was born. The air was crisp with the scent of fallen leaves and distant snow. Kaelin came to stand beside her, his arm wrapping around her waist in a familiar, comforting gesture. He was older now, his dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, but his eyes, when they looked at her, held the same intense devotion as they had on the very first day. Below them, in the castle's training yard, their son, now a tall, strong young man, was sparring with Marcus, the king's grizzled second-in-command. Kale moved with a unique grace, a blend of human strategy and a wolf's fluid power. He was everything they had hoped he would be: strong, compassionate, and wise. "Do you remember the day we met?" Kaelin asked, his voice a low rumble against her ear. She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "In the blighted reach. I was terrified. I thought you were going to kill me." "And I thought I was dreaming," he confessed. "I had searched for so long. I had started to believe the prophecy was a cruel lie my ancestors had invented to give themselves hope. And then I saw you, standing in that dying wood, so full of life." She turned in his arms, her hands coming up to cup his face. She looked into his silver eyes, the eyes of her husband, her king, the father of her child, the eyes of the man who had seen a miracle where everyone else saw a flaw. "You were the miracle, Kaelin," she said softly. "Not me, not our son. You. Your hope was the miracle. Your faith, when you had no reason for it. Your love, which healed a wound I didn't even know I had." He leaned down and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss filled with the shared history of a lifetime. It held the memory of fear and pain, the triumph of their son's birth, the quiet joy of thousands of ordinary days, and the unwavering promise of thousands more to come. When they broke apart, they remained on the balcony, wrapped in each other's arms, watching their son, their future, laughing in the twilight. The desert had bloomed, not just with a single flower, but with a vibrant, thriving garden that had reclaimed the wasteland. And Alara, the wolfless girl from the edge of the world, stood at the heart of it all, no longer an outcast, but the cherished queen of a king's heart and the quiet anchor of a kingdom reborn. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of love, hope, and transformation. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to be notified of our next tale. Your support means the world to us, and we can't wait to share more stories with you.